Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarine Akhanda Mandalakaram Yena Vyaptam Characharam Tad Padam Darshitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hare Priye Apavitra Pavitro Va Sarva Vastha Gato Piva. There's your va, by the way. Remember the va? We're going to see these vas now immediately. So there's a va means or, right? We're in the section. What do you fix your mind on? And we started off with Ishvara Pranidhanad va. Now pay attention to the va in this invocation if you care to. Apavitra pavitro va. Whether you're pure or impure. Apavitra pavitro va. Va is going to be a big word in our Svadhyaya today. All right, so let's simple little one phoneme, va. Apavitra pavitro va. Sarva vastagatopi sa. Ya smaret pundarikaksham. Sa bhayabhyantara shuchihi. Okay, friends. I'm going to put that Sanskrit course back up on my website. And so your assignment for next week, all of you, is to learn Sanskrit. There's about, I don't know, there must be about 50 lessons. So you do about 6 or 7 a day. And by next week, we can study the Sanskrit. Why not? Why not learn Sanskrit? Seriously. It's beautiful. It's great to wrap your mind around the linguistic paradigms and try to puzzle out what's this ending? Where's the subject here? What's the object? And just keep the brain active. And it's a lifelong thing. So maybe, obviously, you learn the Sanskrit, you're getting closer to the source of its information. You know, it's not being mediated by another language. Of course, the knowledge itself is being mediated by words, but you can't function otherwise. You wouldn't even know there was an Atman unless someone told you, oh, that's words. So you can't just jump to Nirbija Samadhi without any words being presented to you in the first place. Why would anybody think of just Chittavriti Nirodhing? Who would ever think of that? Who would ever think that's just like a sane thing to do? Who would ever think that you could do it? Who could think you could do it? There are philosophers that deny that's possible. There are philosophers that say all consciousness is intentional, always has an object. Buddhists say that, and they're heavy-duty meditators. So this information comes to us through words, and the words in the moksha traditions of Sanskrit, of course, at least in the Vedic traditions. Buddhism is mostly written in Pali. So learn it. Why don't we all learn it? I'm still learning it, my friends, after 2.5 decades. Never ends, because words, you know, if you speak an Indian language, you have a great vocabulary start. Just like Italians, for them, it's effortless to learn Latin. They just have to learn the rules of Latin, but they got all the vocab. For us, we're never going to get to that. We don't have the vocab, but words mean so many different things. So you just have to, you get, you just accept at a certain point that you're going to be, you're going to have to use a dictionary till the end of time, at least to the end of this life. Fine. So that's your prop. You have to have a prop. So course is going back up. And it's not easy. It's a tapas. And you will never accomplish it. But you'll slowly improve. And you'll get much delight in whatever you can figure out when you run into Sanskrit passages. Do it. And then if we don't get liberated, at least next lifetime, we get born in a situation that's favorable to continue those kinds of studies. Okay, so by next week. So we've got a bunch of vars. And the question was raised, this Ishvara Pranidhana Dva, I checked over the commentary. It's optional to what? It's optional to the verses before the Ishvara Pranidhana Dva. Okay, so we go back to 120. This is how most commentators take it, but there was one commentator who takes it optional to Vairagya and Abhyasa at the beginning. Right? How do you nirodha it? Abhyasa Vairagya Abhyam. So one commentator, do you know who he is? Do you know he's the commentator? His name is, my God, I forgot. He's a Muslim. He's a Muslim. Al-Biruni. Is it Al-Biruni? He was a traveler. And he's so objective. He's so, you wouldn't know that he was Islamic, theologian. He's so faithful to the tradition. Doesn't twist it, doesn't try. The only time that his one of the times his orientation just peeks through a little bit is the Ishvara verse. And then he says, well, this Ishvara comes, he accepts the Hindu, avatar, no problem. Says, well, the Hindus, he doesn't say the Hindus, so Ishvara comes in different ways. He goes to some, he sends an incarnation. Then he goes to some, he sends a prophet. Then, wait a minute, this isn't Hindu. This is a Near Eastern thing. This is a Abrahamic thing, the idea of prophets. Then you, if you were given the commentary and you didn't know who it was, you wouldn't know. I love him. He's so fair. He's so neutral. He's such a scholar. He's such a scholar. This is what it says. This is what this, and he's reading the commentaries. What kind of an open mind is that? But he's still a Muslim. He's not becoming a yogi or anything. He's just a real scholar. So he takes the va as referring. So Ishvara Pranidhana va. Well, what's the va, right? Or you can attain the state. It's a samadhi, and he takes it puts it all the way back to Abhyasa Vairagya. And funnily enough, one of our students, from the yoga community, he just did an MA thesis, but a few years ago, and he argues that as well. And he does a real thorough study. I don't agree with that, and he knows that because he said, "Well, Bryant takes it like everybody else." He's very respectful. So Ishvara Pranidhana Dva. Al-Biruni. Yes. Al-Biruni. So here we have Ishvara Pranidhana Dva, or so therefore or means compared to what? And I think most commentators go back here. They go back to or, there's no or here, for others. So he goes there, 19. Some yogis get stuck in these subtle layers of Prakriti. Their minds are absorbed in subtle layers, like the sattvic higher levels of Prakriti. We had this discussion, Prakriti Layanam, and they think they're enlightened because that's high states. They become omniscient, they become detached, blissful. And then he goes, others, they attain, and the sense is that by their own efforts, faith, virya, sort of virya is strength of, this sort of tejas, just physical. It's more of a physical word than a mental word. Virya means, it's where we get our English word. Virile, of course, in English, virile has sexual connotations, but it comes from the Latin vir, which just means a man, actually. A man is vir. And so that's all connected to the word virya. So the idea of, virility, man, and in Sanskrit, virya. So it's kind of like a physiological power, potency. You got to have certain strength to do, of course, it's mental. But, there's a certain arduousness, sit straight, sit still. There's a certain virya required. And then memory, you've got to keep the goal in mind, and also you could take smriti in different ways. You could take smriti as keep the nirodha memory in mind. When you're in meditation, when you're trying to fix your mind on japa, it wanders off. So you've got to keep the nirodha samskara, he's going to call it later in this chapter. You've got to keep the nirodha samskara fixed. So when other samskaras try to distract the mind, and think about email or whatever it might be. And then there's samadhi, and then there's this wisdom. From samadhi, then there comes the prajna, the ultimate wisdom, which is what is the highest state of wisdom, called viveka in chapter 2, which is the ability to discriminate between Purusha and Prakriti. That's the grand finale goal of the material mind, at least in jnana. In bhakti, of course, the highest goal is that there's a Bhagavan over and above my own Atman. So preceded. So for others, the state of samadhi is, is preceded by this sort of consecutive type of activity of, first, you have to have faith, you have to be, you have to believe there's an Atman there lurking behind the mind. And then you have to sort of have the potency to take up the path, the sort of, the vigor, maybe that's a good word, the vigor, the physiological potency. Maybe potency is probably a good word for vira. It has that sense of potency. Smriti, keep the goal in mind, and then you go, okay, so that's for others. And then he goes, and then he has this business. It's near if you're intense, and that nearness, that intensity has a sort of light kind of intensity, which is a bit of an oxymoron, but let's go with it. Light intensity, medium, I don't know why. I think, just the philosophical mind, the scientific mind has a tendency to schematize, to just sort of not just come out with sweeping generalization, which is not the sign of a careful thinker. A careful thinker has a place for everything, schematizes, divides things up. The schematization, science is schematic in its nature, right? You divide forces into different, what are your base, you strive for simplicity, but you put things in certain, there's 4 kinds of forces, basic forces, magnetism, electromagnetism, so on and so forth. That's the sort of analytic mind. You analyze things into compartments, actually. That's one of the things analysis does. This doesn't fit here. Okay, we'll put it over there. It doesn't fit there either. Okay, we create a new category. So that's schematics. So this is a schematic verse. So this sort of intensity is light, middling, intense, right? And then you've got the va. So most people take this va to be in contrast to doing it kind of on your own without theism. You just do it. Your sheer willpower. Faith, vigor is kind of like a willpower kind of word. Right? I have the power, I have the potency. I don't need no Bhagavan. And you can attain the goal of yoga without Bhagavan. You cannot, obviously you can't attain bhakti without Bhagavan, because bhakti is the attainment of Bhagavan. But you can't attain Bhagavan with your power, your yogic virtuosity. No. Humility and surrender. Bhagavan cannot be conquered. Not even by the most powerfully endowed mental virtuosity of a yogi superstar. No. You read who are the bhaktas? They're illiterate, the gopis, they're non-yogis. They just love Bhagavan. They got no qualification whatsoever. Why are the gopis the highest bhaktas of all time? Of all time, my friend. In a male-dominated yogic universe, which is what the yogic universe of ancient India is, there's the occasional token female. Why? But when it comes to bhakti, that all gets knocked down. The greatest bhaktas, the text makes this point, not the brahmanas. And in the case of the gopis, uneducated forest dwellers, not even village dwellers, forest dwellers. So this is the va then is, or you can do it with your own virya, your own shraddha. Here, let's look at the 5 words. Shraddha, your faith, your virya, your smriti, keeping the goal fixed in mind, keeping the nirodha samskar active, and then samadhi. You can samadhi, you can keep your mind absolutely still, fixed, sheer force of your own yogic prowess, and then you get this and then you get this state of discriminating, of realizing that the purusha is not the mind, or you get it for Ishvara. Now, there's going to be a bunch of other ors. Notice in Indian, I guess, writing, the most important items on the list are placed first or last. The Mimamsas and the Vedantins have this, because the old texts are full of, they're obscure in places. It's hard to construe meaning for us, but it was hard to construe meaning 2,000 years, 1,500 years ago. So then, and sometimes passages seem contradictory, and it says this here and that over there, and the world is real here, it's false of it. So then the Mimamsas, who were commenting on even older texts and the ritual texts, the Vedas before the Upanishads, they came up with this system that how do you establish the true purport of a text, especially if it's contradictory. And they said, right, leading statements, conclusion statements carry more weight. Let's say you're not sure what a passage, it seems contradictory, a bit weird. Opening statements, closing statement, for that. So they have the 6 rules: opening statements, closing statement, repetition. If something's repeated, then clearly the passage is drawing attention to that. And they have these 6 rules. So opening statements. So on this list, Ishvara Pranidhana comes first. Number 1. So that's important. And number 2, Ishvara gets like 6 or 7 verses. He's omniscient. He's the guru of the ancients. He comes as the sound. Patanjali was a theist, my friends. And what did theism mean 2,000 years ago? What did it mean? You're either a Shaivite or a Vaishnavite. That's what you were. There were no other options. How do we know that? Well, we got million billion texts from 2,000 years ago. And who's Ishvara in the text? Who's Ishvara in the Mahabharata? Who's Ishvara in all the Puranas? Who's Ishvara in the Gita? Well, it's Krishna, Vishnu, Shiva. And then later you get the Devi traditions, but they don't have the same rich textual traditions. But you do have powerful Devi traditions. I don't think the fact that it's later means that they are somehow, I just think that they didn't attain literary form till later. But Devi theologies go back to the beginning. They were right there alongside the other theologies. So you have Devi, if you were a theist, you believed that there was an Ishvara or an Ishvari, you believed there was a Bhagavan or a Bhagavati, what were your options? The only options that we see presented in this vast mass of Sanskrit literature, there was more written in Sanskrit than any other language of the world up until the advent of the printing press. More stuff written in Sanskrit than Latin or Greek. So you have this vast literary culture. And what is theism in that? It's Shiva, it's the devotee of Shiva, and many forms of Shiva, Vishnu, and that means Ram, Krishna, all the forms, Narayan. And then Devi, at a certain point, Devi, not nearly as much in terms of literary, but that doesn't mean anything. There will be oral traditions. So Patanjali was a theist. Everything he says about Ishvara, Krishna says about himself in the Gita. And in my commentary there, I draw all the connections. Krishna says, I am Om, I'm the guru of the ancients. I'm omniscient, everything. And Shiva says the same thing about himself in the Shvetasvatara. That's what theism is. Take it or leave it. Okay. So there you have your Va. Right. And then we have all these verses, Ishvara, da 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 da. And you do japa, and then you get clear out all the obstacles, and these are the obstacles. And then you have this Maitri Karuna verse, which is a beautiful verse. I just puzzled about its location. But anyway, it's a lovely verse. I know yogis like it because it's kind of more this worldly, and it more, this text is not about how to live in the world. You want that? Read the Gita. Gita gives teaching karma, action. What does action mean? It being in the world and acting and relating to people. That's karma yoga. This is not karma yoga. This is the opposite. It's pratyahara, withdrawing from the world. So, but this lovely little verse, I have to admit, and it's it's an old. It must have been floating around because the Buddhists have the same thing. They call it the four. They have the names for it. The four. Forget. As long as we don't forget our mantras, my friends. When senility comes knocking on the door, and the mind is like, oh, you can't remember anything. As long as we can mumble our mantras, let old age not take our mantras, and we just cling. The Brahma Viharas, cling to our mantras right now. So now we've got a bunch of Vas. We're going to have 5 or 6 Vas. Okay, we've done with the Ishvara option. First on the list, gets special attention, loads of information. Right, Ishvara was 123. And now all the way to 134. So Ishvara got 11 verses, and these only get 1 each. So the fact that Ishvara is first on the list and the fact that he gets 11 verses versus 1 should speak for itself, my friends. Ishvara is promoting a japa practice. But he's pretty liberal and open-minded for this. He's not, he's giving options. Okay, you don't like Ishvara. You don't like the idea that there's something higher than you. You want to be Bhagavan. You want to be, oh, I'm the truth. All right, you want to do that, fine. Then you can fix your mind on your prana. Va, there's your va. The prachardana and the vidharanabhyam, the retention and the exhalation of the breath, right? So that we are more familiar with the language of Puraka, Rechaka, and Kumbhaka. And the commentators say, why do they talk about exhaling and retaining and not inhaling? And they say, well, you don't need to mention inhaling, because if you exhale and retain, at some point you have to inhale or you're dead. So I think they're just kind of, so what, that somebody says, well, where's the 3? Where's the 3rd? Why does it only say exhaling and retaining? You're a commentator. You have to sort of try to have an answer. I like to think of them as, these are powerful intellectuals. They have their own students. So they're running into questions in their svadhyayas with their students. It's just like when I was writing this commentary, I was representing the commentaries, but I'd be teaching it to my students, and some of that feedback gets in your head and it kind of comes out in your writing. It's natural. So, so now you can, in other words, you can, if you don't want a theistic practice, you're just not either you reject the idea of God, right? Ananivarya, the Sankhya Sutras, a later text, 15th century, coming in the yoga tradition, Sankhya's yoga. It says, Ishvara ananivarya, not necessary. Doesn't contribute anything to metaphysical needs. Let Prakriti be, produce the world by its own svabhava. Why do we need an Ishvara to stir it? What do you gain? There has to be a prime cause, something that creates, something that sets it all in motion. And you want to say, this is the atheistic Sankhya, non-theistic, near Ishvaravadi. And you Ishvara people, you Ishvaravadin. Vada means a point of view, philosophy. And Vadin, write this down, my friends. I'd like to be able to use it. A Vadin is the follower of a particular school of thought. So if you're an Advaita follower, then you're following Advaita Vada, and the follower is Vadin, like Yogin. In means somebody that owns something, follows something, and the ladies are Ini. So Ishvara Vadin, Vadini. So if you believe in Ishvara, you're Ishvara Vadin. Buddhists, they're near, no, near Ishvara Vada is Buddhism. Jainism, near Ishvara Vada. And Sankhya, mostly Sankhya is Ishvara Vada, contrary to what you read in books. Most Sankhya, Gita Sankhya, Ishvara. Mahabharata Moksha Dharma, Ishvara. All of the Puranas are all Sankhya in their metaphysics. So the vast majority of Sankhya traditions were Ishvara Vada, and the followers were Ishvara Vadin. But there was an atheistic Sankhya school, and Vedanta, in the second chapter of Vedanta, they reject it. They say well, something has to stir. There has to be a prime mover, like Aristotle came to that conclusion. Something has to be, everything's moving and it's being moved by something else and moved by something else. Well, there has to be something that there has to be some immobile mover. Because if the mover is moving, then he needs a mover moving him, and he needs another, and you're in infinite regress. So Aristotle ended up with his famous prime mover and ran into all kinds of weird problems, which I'd love to talk about, but we're doing the sutras right now. So the Sankhya Sutra says Ishvara ananivarya, not necessary. And so the Vedantin says, well, you need something to stir the gunas in the beginning of creation. Who's going to stir them? Maybe Aristotle, who took rebirth as a Vedantin, and say, something's got to stir the gunas, right? You're accepting cyclicality. You accept that the universe, you've heard of cyclicality of creation. You've heard of that. So there's creation for whatever it is, billions of years, and then there's a period of stillness. The gunas don't move. And then the next creation kicks in, right? The sort of rebounding universe of physics. Physics is now lots of physicists are taking this more seriously as an idea from previously, and now making a comeback. Universe is going to collapse, implode, and then maybe re-emerge again. So that's what the Puranas say. But this period between creative cycles, there's billions of years, and Vedanta says, well, who's going to kickstart it then? If the trigger was in Prakriti, then it would always be creating. It wouldn't be still. If internal to Prakriti was the trigger for its own evolution, then why would that trigger just trigger at that point after 14 billion years? So they're going to say you need somebody outside to kickstart it. That's what they would say if they heard about a Big Bang theory. They say, why did it bang then? Where's the trigger? If the trigger's internal, it would always have banged. Why would it bang at that particular moment that we call 14 billion years ago? Anyway, the point is, the Sankhya says, no, it's internal to it. What have you gained by saying there's an external agent? The creative big crunch. Thank you, Tony. Is that Tony? Tommy. Yes, the big crunch. So Prakriti, the atheistic near Ishvaravada, let's use our vocabulary so we cement the samskara. The near Ishvaravada Sankhya, the Sankhya that does not accept an Ishvara, says, what have you gained? Just you're saying, if you're going to say Ishvara kickstart that, well, who kickstarts Ishvara then? And if you're going to say, well, it's just Ishvara's nature, he doesn't need a kickstart, well, we say Prakriti doesn't need a kickstart then. If you can say it, we can say it. Us materialists. What have you gained? What have you got over us? So that's the near Ishvara Sankhya. So they would have been non-material. They would have been non-theists, is where we're going with this. Some of them maybe became Buddhists. Eventually, we now call them Buddhists, but Buddhism wasn't formalized. Buddhism wasn't othered for centuries. We now think of Buddhism as non-Vedika. You buy your intro to Indian philosophy. You have the Nastika schools. Na-asti, na-asti, na-asti. There is no Ishvara. That's another near Ishvaravada. You can call it na-astika. So Patanjali is pretty liberal. He says, okay, if that doesn't work for you, this Ishvara Japa Om, fixing the mind on that, fix it on the breath. There, look. Prachardana vidharanabhyam va, there you va, of the breath what? you can exhale. Pra means out, forward, like Prakriti itself is kr. It makes things forward. Things come out of it. Creation. It's pra. There's this idea of something moving forward, like the creation emerges out of Prakriti. Do your prana. So that's your option, my friend. You don't like Ishvara? Then there's one. Here's another one. Vishaya Vati Va Pravritti. Here's your vritti. And there's a va there. Utpana. Manasa Stiti Nibandhani. So you can focus on a sense object. Now the yogis, the commentaries, you can't focus on a sense object out there because you've already gone through pratyahara, right? Where you've involuted consciousness. So when he says here, abhishaya, remember we had this word several times, vishaya? Remember I said, oh, look, there it is again. We had it twice already. Let's make our connections. What is vairagya? What's vairagya, my friends? What is it? Vairagya, right here. Here it is. Drisha, vishaya, a sense object. Okay? So now we're seeing the same word, vishaya. So the commentators don't want that sense object to be external. They were now already internalized. So basically what they say is that if you focus attention on the tip of the nose internally, you get a supernormal sense of smell. It's not your mundane smell, and they don't go into it. These kinds of claims are mostly associated with the Tantrika Siddha Hatha tradition. Which what's the common denominator? These are alternative names, my friends. Hatha, Siddha, the Hatha traditions, Siddha traditions, Tantra. They're basically a cluster of traditions. You can call them any of those names. What's the common denominator? What makes them a cluster of traditions different from others? Kundalini. You have the subtle physiology with the chakras, and the goal is to raise Kundalini up through the Sushumna, in the subtle psychic channels of the body, the central one. Patanjali's got nothing to do with that. It doesn't mean they reject it, because he does mention a chakra. So he does mention, it's like the Bhagavata Purana, 18,000 verses. That's the text I work with. It mentions a chakra in one verse, which means that they accept that physiology. They're just not interested in it. For certain schools, that tantrika physiology is still prakriti. They find it a little hard to assign it a high level of spiritual, metaphysically, that it's very this focus on this physiology makes it yoga, but a high, but it's still in the realm of physiology and subtle energies and the chakras, and all of this is prakriti. These are prakritic physiology. There's a gross physiology, the pranas, all of that, kundalini, all of it, shaktipat. The Vedanta traditions sort of take the view that they accept that all of that exists, but there's this general sense of associating it still with those who are worldly minded, worldly in the sense that prakritically connected, even a high physiological level of prakriti. You may think that's unfair. I'm not taking sides. I'm just sharing, the attitude that's why tantra is always, and of course left-handed tantra, God forbid, but even right-handed tantra, you don't find many references to it. There's no reference in Vedanta Sutra, no references to it in the Yoga Sutras. Well, one reference to a chakra, and there's one reference coming up. Then this whole hatha physiology, kundalini, no reference to it in even in Sankhya, which is very prakritic. It does talk about the subtle body. There's no talk of kundalini. So the hatha yoga tradition, they became popularized in the West, of course, but in India they tend to be, I think they're still widespread, especially in the Himalayas, in Bengal, a lot of the Devi traditions. All right, I'm taking a little detour there, but here, why are we talking about all this? Because this verse, they talk about the subtle sense of smell, which is something that is a little not out of place in yoga, but it's not but it is something that associated that, you know, when the chakras, when Kundalini rises through the chakras, the different chakras, you have these super sensual, but nonetheless sensual, but super sensual. So you hear sounds and smells that are not the gross prakritic ones, that are not attainable to normal people, but they are attainable to yogis who are using this sort of subtle physiology in the quest for liberation. So here's a reference to that's what the commentators do with this verse, this va here, okay, this va. So the first va is prana, and the second va is a vishayavati, a pravritir, manastitini. The mind can attain steadiness, because remember, if you're fixing the mind, it's got to be fixed on something. So stiti nibandhani of the mind. There is the fixed situation. So stiti, any of these sta words are cognate with our English stand, steady, stable. These sta words are old Indo-European. And in Sanskrit, if you have a sta with an ending on it, there's so many, it could be noun, could be a verb. But the root sta means precisely that, stable, steady. And we see the same words in English in the words I just mentioned. So there is the nibandhana, the connection, the steady connection of the mind can arise from the vishayabhati, a sense bearing, a sensual object, but it's not the gross objects out there. Why? Because we're internal now. We've already passed the fifth limb of yoga, which is pratyahara. So therefore, if it's not external, then the commentators talk about subtle experiences, which are just mentioned in passing here in this one verse, but are much more central and much more of interest to the Shakta tradition. So hopefully everything I just said kind of fits together, okay? That's why we took a little excursion and spoke a little bit about the Hatha traditions, because I know a lot of you have probably run into teachers or traditions that have more of a Kundalini or a Shakta Hatha focus. So I just wanted to make it clear that those traditions are not, you don't find them in yoga, in Sankhya, in Vedanta, Mimamsa, Nyaya, the so-called six schools, classical schools. Because so therefore, that's why there's six schools. Why isn't Hatha Yoga a school? They have philosophy, they have serious analytical thinkers. How come they didn't make it into the list of six? Well, because they were always considered marginal. Hope I'm not disappointing anybody. But I'm not taking sides. I'm just providing information. Right? Or steady, or now there's a va. Now we're on the fourth va. We've had Ishvara Pranidhanad va. We have pranas, the pranava. We have this Vishayavati. And by the way, one commentator says something very interesting here. He says, if you have a super sensual experience, even though it's obviously not the goal of yoga, if you have a super normal experience, it increases your faith in the other claims that yoga makes. Because we're making all these claims, and we're sitting there reading it, thinking, oh, well, you know, my mind likes it, but how do I know it's true? What if a skeptic challenged us? What are you believing in? What grounds are you believing all this stuff? Well, at least if you've had one supernormal experience, as Hariharananda, well, at least you can say, well, I know for sure there's something beyond the mundane, and that increases your faith. There could be a million other things, or there certainly could be the things that the Yoga Sutra speaks about. So I don't know if any of you have had supernormal experiences. And I can't say but I had one very, very profound bhakti experience, and that definitely worked. It wasn't the grand finale or anything like that. It wasn't darshan of Krishna. You know, I didn't get to help Krishna steal butter in crawling about in Vrindavan, feed the monkeys. But you know, if you have even anything, you increases, even if you've seen a ghost or something tamasic, anything that's not accountable by our conventional mundane laws of physics or prakriti, if you've had any kind of a out of body, anything like that will increase your faith that if you've had one experience, that all these other claims that are being made, you are more open to them. It's just natural. So if any of you have had cool experiences, do share. I'm always interested in them. Drop me an email and say if you care to. Okay. Right. So now there's another var. Again, this is a vague one. And the commentators, we know when they say, or it could mean this, or it could mean that, or it could mean this, to me, that means they don't totally sure themselves. They're just saying, okay, what could this possibly be that's going to fit within the philosophy of yoga? So Vishokava, or something which is luminous bearing, illuminating, literally Jyotish Mati, it possesses light, and Vishoka, without sorrow. That literally means Vishoka means V without, like V Vairagya, V, without shoka, sorrow, and there's your bar, and Mati means to, like Van and Man, means to possess. So it's a suffix. Suffix is something you put on the end of a word. In prefix you put before. Sanskrit has lots of suffixes, more than English. So it possesses what? Jyoti. Jyoti, you've all heard of Jyoti, Brahma Jyoti, light. So what the hell does that mean? Or you fix yourself on something which is light-bearing and without sorrow. So you can see you can do so many things with that. So the commentators take, they say whatever they're going to say, and they all say different things. Some say, well, when mostly it seems to be connected when the mind is very, very sattvic, because you can't chitta vritti nirodha if the mind is rajasic. By definition, rajas means always moving, and tamas means slothful and lethargic. A tamasic mind, you're gonna fall asleep. So therefore, the mind has to be sattvic. The more sattvic it is, now sattva by nature is luminous, and sattva, a quality of sattva, as we read in the Gita in the 18th chapter, is its happiness. Not the ananda of the Atman. You have to don't confuse the Satchidananda of the Atman itself with the Shuka of the Sattva. Sattva is happiness bearing, but it's prakritic. And it's a happiness that comes from detachment, freedom of desire. It's just complete liberating. You're seeing the oneness of all beings. And it's just a state of kind of well-being, contentment, that comes when you give up craving, you give up desire. We give up all our nonsense, my friends. We cling on to our nonsense. So that's Vishoka. Okay, so the way they interpret this verse is all of the common denominator is something to do with highly, highly sattvic mind, which is illuminous. It's radiant by its very, when there's no rajas and tamas obscuring it, it's radiant. Don't confuse it with the radiance of the soul, please. I think the halos of medieval Christianity would be this. It's sattva. When you go into a good museum and you go into the Byzantine art and the sort of art of the 12th, 13th century, all of the saints have these halos. That for me is sattva radiating out. And it's Jyotishmati, that's what this verse is saying. It's Vishoka. You're free of misery. You're detached. If you're detached, you don't cling. If you don't cling, then you don't. If you lose something, it doesn't mean anything to you. You're just content, and you're fully absorbed in meditation on the self, which you know is eternal. So then the fear of death minimizes anyway. Patanjali says it may not quite disappear because vidoshoapi, even the wise, cling, are fearful of death, but you're much less fearful than others. So that so there's lots of things you can do with this. Okay, a sattvic mind is. You can fix the mind on somehow. The mind can be fixed in pure sattva. There's nothing disturbing it. Or another var now. The vitaraga vishaya. There's a vishaya, my friends. There's a vishaya here. 135 vishaya, because it's an object. The mind has to have a vishaya. It's got to have an object to be fixed. This is not mindfulness. Don't confuse this with Buddhist mindfulness. Mindfulness meditation does not seek to fix the mind. It seeks to witness it, observe it, perceive its foolish nature. But so another vishaya is you can vitaraga, you can fix the mind on someone who is free of desire. And you could take this as a kind of a guru figure. If you read Muktananda's Play of Consciousness, Muktananda was a great Siddha teacher who came to the West in the 60s. And he wrote one of the classics of the 60s. There was classics. There was Autobiography of a Yogi, which was a classic of the counterculture. There was the Hare Krishna books. The Krishna book by Bhaktivedanta Swami was a kind of one of the classics floating around in the 60s. And then was Muktananda's Play of Consciousness. And he simply meditated on his guru, who was called Nityananda or something, Nityananda. And so that's an example, but it has to be free of desire. What's a guru? Free of desire, my friends. Free of desire. When Krishna, give me once. Oh, I can't minimize. Okay. How do I get in here? Chapter 2 of the Gita. Arjuna says, how do you recognize a sthita-di, one whose mind is fixed? Can I minimize this? Can I do that? Oh, I can do that. And I can do this. And I can go down here. And no, doesn't want me to do that. Okay. Eleonora, can you get chapter 2 of the Gita? You think?
Yeah,
Please?
give me a minute.
Yeah, and let's bring it up.
But you
And go to I make you co-host, and then we look at the end where Arjuna says, how do you recognize a sthita-di, right? One whose mind is fixed, which is what the goal of yoga is. And Krishna gives an answer, and every single answer is free of desire, free of desire. He changes the word, free of attachment. That's the Vita Raga of this verse, and I have to make you co-host. So when I go into participants, and I go and I look for E.T, there she is, and I do what? More, make more, add pin, make co-host, bada boom. And we'll just have a quick peek at those verses, if it's okay with you all. It's really important to make these connections, my friends, because the Gita and the Yoga Sutras are our canonical texts. That's what they are. So you go, can you make that bigger?
Yes. What verse?
Oh, go to the end. I don't know. Go to 250 and we'll see where we land. And then Arjuna is going to ask this question. Go. Go, 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 go. Back. There. Okay? Back. One back. Here. Look at Arjuna's great question. Arjuna spoke. Can you see it? Can you make it bigger? Please, Eleonora.
Yeah.
Arjuna spoke. How does one describe him who is of steady wisdom, right? The whole of Yoga Sutras about steady. What's the word? Samadhi. Yeah, there it is. Look, there. Oh, look. Samadhi star. There's your star. Your star word. Root. We're all going to learn Sanskrit, remember? So star, samadhi. One who is situated in samadhi. So obviously this is relevant to what we're doing in the Yoga Sutra, right? Of him, right? Sthita-di. Now another star word. Who's D, right? D. This D is the same as comes from dhyana. D is the feminine noun from D that you get the word dhyana. So one whose mind is sthita. How would he talk? How does he sit? Right? Arjuna is a practicalist. He says, I can't climb into his head. I don't know if his mind is what he's thinking about. So can I tell externally? Does he sit differently? Does he float in the air? How does he speak? How does he wander about? Right? So that's the question. Basically, how do you recognize someone? Now go down to Krishna's answers. There's 20 verses, and we won't have time to look at them all, but just get a sense of them. And let's do this. Oh, let's get rid of that. Bada boom. Look at it, every verse. When he leaves behind desires, all of them, sarvam. Why all of them? Why can't I have just a couple? I'll tell you what, get rid of 10 trillion desires, but let me keep 2. No, because if you keep 2 desires, what happens? Well, your consciousness is going to be fixed on those 2 desires, isn't it? And if it's fixed on the 2 desires, what's it not fixed on then? Svarupa pastanam. So all of them, he says, all of them. Sarvam. All right, and the next, look, whose desire for pleasures has disappeared. And he gives 20 verses. Every single one of them has something about desire. Okay, you get the point. Maybe do 2 more verses. Look, here, withdraws the senses from the sense objects. That's pratyahara. Without attachment, that means without a desire. Neither rejoicing nor dislike. Let me paraphrases it. So back to the Yoga Sutra. Thank you. So you can fix the mind on one who is raga, vita. You know, raga is one of the kleshas. Here's your vishaya. Fix the mind on one who is on a pure saintly being. What's a saintly being? Let's be practical. These words are useless. Saint. What a useless word. What does it mean? Right? Or, oh, spiritual. He's spiritual. What does that mean? It could be a ghost up in the attic as a spirit. So let's be practical. What does it mean to be an advanced yogi free of desire? Period. All over the Gita. I told you so many times. A student did an MA thesis. How many words in the Gita speak about paraphrases, synonyms? And it was a fifth, between a quarter and a fifth of the entire text, a quarter of the text. So you can't get away from it. You want to be a yogi, we have to be free of desire. All this highfalutin, oh, what does this samadhi mean and that samadhi mean? And how about we start working on the kleshas? That's where it's all at, becoming free of desire. Now, so there's your third, fourth var. Now another var. And this is another odd one. Svapna nidra jnana lambana. You're a lambana. Now there's the word alambana. It's the prop. In fact, in Iyengar yoga, I think, your props are called alambanas. I mean, not everybody calls them that, but they sometimes are called alambanas. So, alambanas. Oh, just to go back to that tantric verse, the Kundalini business. When Guruji Iyengar first wrote one of his books, I know this as a fact, he had some disparaging comments about Kundalini related, the Hatha Tantrika. Nothing against him, but it reflects him as a Brahmana who is situated in the Vedanta traditions. What I'm saying is the Vedanta tradition, the Vedic traditions, why didn't they allow Tantra into the one the sixth school of philosophy? How come? They are brilliant. Abhinavagupta, brilliant theologians. Why didn't they, so they were always considered, they were always marginalized. And Guruji Iyengar was just part of that tradition. It's not a judgment on him. And Bhaktivedanta Swami was part of that tradition, the Harikaya. So in this first edition of the book, he had some disparaging comments, and then it got edited out. His disciples, somebody must have said, look, Guruji, that's not, we're in the West now, and not good to criticize or whatever they said. And then you see the later editions, and it has that passage has been excised. And why do I mention that? Just to reinforce the point that Orthodox, Guruji was Orthodox in many ways. He wasn't, the teaching of the asanas was an innovation, and he got criticized by, as did Krishnamacharya, but Krishnamacharya especially was super hyper-Orthodox. And so therefore they just inherit, certain attitudes, cultural attitudes that nowadays we would consider, sexist and probably racist and elitist. That's just part of the, same as colonial England. You can't judge, previous generations by our modern standards. You read all our great literature, they're all racist, and elitist and sexist, all of them, everybody. If you tossed all that out, you'd have no philosophers left. You wouldn't be studying Plato or Aristotle or Kant or anybody. So they all, and as we are, 100 years, they'll look back on us and say, what about speciesism? Why did you leave out animals then, with all your isms? With all your liberating theologies? So probably they'll look at us and think, well, what a horror show our slaughterhouses are. So this is just, so we'll get back to this. And so this is another strange verse. The alambana can be sleep, a dream. And here's another one where the commentators sort of just go all over the place in the sense that they don't. What do you do with this? Well, how does that mean you can fix your mind from the knowledge, the jnana, your alambana, right? That support of your mind is the jnana, the knowledge that comes from the dreams of sleep. How does that fit into Chittavritti Nirodha? Well, I like the way they come up, they do the best they can. So one commentator says, what Shankara says, well, typical Advaita metaphor. Well, this world is like a dream. So just as a dream, you think it's real, but when you wake up, you realize it's a dream. And so the enlightened being, when he realized this is Jagat Mithya, that the world is false and Brahman Satya and Brahman is true, then he takes it like that, but it doesn't, which is fine. It doesn't really fit the sequencing here. Vachaspati Mishra says, when you dream of Ishvara at night, so he's giving a whole bhakta spin on it. Then how do you only dream about things that are very vivid in the day. So how are you going to dream of Ishvara at night? Well, you're not, unless you're thinking of Ishvara all day. So he takes the opportunity to throw a nice, for a bhakta like me, I'm very happy to read that, but it doesn't really fit if I had to be an honest scholar. But it's a great little save, a good save. And then, so that's the second one. Another one was, so anyway, what was another third one? There were three different sort of suggestions as to how, but clearly the commentators, had to sort of scratch their heads a bit on this one. I'm just looking at my Svapna, yes. And what else? Sankara. Yeah, very much that. Okay, so let's not, take it or leave it. And then I love this. Oh, my friends, this I do my namaha to Patanjali. He's so non-dogmatic. He clearly is a theist. I think he's a Vaishnava because of the way the words he uses reflect kind of they reflect Vaishnava vernaculars. But when I said that to the Swami who did the 4 fantastic commentary, 4 books, he only did the 2, and then he got fed up, didn't do the other 2. I said, he said, well, I always thought he was a Shaiva. So clearly you're going to project your beloved. So, but he was definitely a Shaiva or a Vaishnava. There were no other options. He wasn't a Shakta. Not Devi, no, because there's no, right? So, okay. So, right. Look at this. Yatabi mata dhyana. Fix your mind on anything you want. How non-dogmatic can you get? Fix your mind on anything you want. Hey, whatever, look, okay, it's Ishvara, your prana, you want to do a bit of hatha, okay, super sensuous little thing, sensation, or your guru, you got a guru, I got a guru, okay, guru, fix your mind, as long as he's raga, free of desire, that's fine too. You dream, whatever that means, okay, fix your mind on whatever you want. I just see him like an Italian, throws his hands up, ma fai come volete. Right, fix your mind on whatever you want. I just think that's one of my favorite verses. Shows you how, he's not dogmatic, and also because the goal is to fix the mind to realize the Atman. In bhakti, you don't have that kind of optionality. You fix your mind on Bhagavan. Otherwise, that's the very meaning of bhakti is you fixing your mind on Bhagavan. You don't want to do that, then you do something else. But you're not doing bhakti then. Whereas Patanjali's, the goal of it is Swarupa Vastanam. So it's irrelevant what you fix your mind on, as long as you fix it. As long as you nirodha the mind, it's irrelevant what you're nirodhering it on. And if you have some attachment to something, or you like your prana, okay, all right, fine, do prana. Oh, my guru, okay, fix it on your guru. Whatever it is, fix the mind. And he just throws his hands up here. Well, maybe not, but he just says, Yata abhimata, whatever you want. As long as it does the job. Look at it. Isn't it lovely? Yata abhimata. And by the way, and I made a point of this is my offering to the Iyengar community, because I started my interaction with doing this sort of thing when I was invited to, I told you the story. And I guess I do Iyengar yoga. I do that. I like that sort of, and that precision. And I did an offering to them here because there was criticism, and Krishnamacharya got criticized. Why all this focus on the asana? From a Vedanta point of view, that's Maya. That's bodily consciousness. Why are you so fixed on the body? Don't you realize you're not the body? A lot of Vedantins and Gyanis, they don't take care of their body. Even bhaktas. No, I'm detached from my body. Yeah, when they get old, they start running off to the hospital. They're not so detached then. But, so I hang out with these bubbas in Vrindavan. Oh, and I do asana. They say, oh, you're so, why you do all this with asana? Yeah, when they get bloody well sick, I have to go with them on a rickshaw to the hospital. Where's the detachment then? So anyway, I love them dearly. But anyway, so I wrote in my commentary, I said, Iyengar students, Patanjali here, there's criticism that there's too much focus on asana. Patanjali here says you can fix your mind on anything you want. And if he allows prana, why not asana? Pranayama is the fourth limb of yoga. Well, why not the third? Provided you use your asana as an alambana to still the mind, my friends, that means you can't be going from one pose to another. Then that's not samadhi. Because if you're saying, okay, now I'm going to go in another pose, well, you just created a vritti, haven't you? That means your mind is active and you're directing, okay, now go in the next pose. So you can't be moving, but you can sit in one pose. I don't know how you would do it, but there's no way of denying that possibility that the mind can be fixed. I don't know what that means, fixed in a pose, but if it can be fixed on your prana, it's easy for me to understand. I can focus the mind, but for some of you, you may have an insight into how, as long as the mind is fixed, that's the sine qua non, Latin, without which no. Minimal requirement. If you're going to use asana to fix your mind, then it has to be immobile. And if anyone challenges you, you point to this verse here. Patanjali himself says, fix it on anything you want. So why not asana if that's your thing? And again, he allows prana, which is the fourth limb of yoga up here. He allows prana, 134, pranasya, with one of the bars. So you could make a case for asana. And if that applies to you, read my commentary there. That was my gift to the Iyengar community, that don't let anybody mess you around and say that you people too much bodily consciousness. Here's your answer. And I, that was my gift for them, my offering. You have to, okay, now, look at this. The Vashikara Asya, the mental control, the mastery. We've had this Vashikara. Should we make our connections? Vashikara is control. Okay? With Vairagya. What's Vairagya? What's Vairagya, my friends? Back to Vairagya. Here we are. Where is it? Vashikara, 115. Vashikara, to make control, to make vash. Vash is to control, to make control. Who does Vairagya? What is it? One whose mind is controlled. It's the controlled mind of one who is without thirst. So Vashikara, highlight that in yellow because you're all going to learn Sanskrit, and it's nice for you to start making these connections. And down here we have a Vashikara in this verse here, which is Vashikara 140. So this mental control, my friends, take it or leave it, goes down to the subatomic particle or the entire Mahatattva. At this point, the yogi's mind has broken out of the confines of karma. Karma keeps our minds trapped in under the control. We're subject to the range of the senses. So we are going to be conscious of our senses. We see so far, we hear so far. Our range of perception is limited by karma. The yogi bypasses karma at these high levels. And then what's to stop consciousness pervading the whole universe? Like light can, if it's not trapped. And this verse is saying, and there's going to be 3 or 4 other verses that say that the consciousness, this isn't consciousness, consciousness and the subtle body. The mind stuff, when it's broken free of the shackles of karma, containing it within the restrictions of the body, can permeate. The Mahatattva means the entire Prakriti. Mahatattva means the great thatness. These are tattvas, the Sankhya talks about tattvas, the tattvas. And we'll look more at the tattvas, okay? So take it or leave it. We're not here to accept or reject. We're studying the Yoga Sutras, and what are we doing? What are we doing in our Swadhyaya? We're reading the sutras, and we're reading them from the lens of the pre-modern commentators. That's our Swadhyaya. So the pre-modern commentators, no one has any problem with this. The Buddha, before he attained his 4th watch of the night, and when he became enlightened, in the first watch, he knew all his past lives, And then in the second, he knew all the past lives. But this idea of omniscience is taken, but is accepted not just by weird mystics, but by the most intellectually erudite, the scholars of ancient India. No one had any problem with this possibility, that the mind stuff can, untethered from its karmic bondage, it can permeate the whole universe. Do you want to take a moment on this or not? Not. All right. So the control of the mind can go from the Maha Tattva. The Tattva means, it's another word for, actually, it's not quite the three gunas, because three gunas are nothing. There's no emergent. Nothing has emerged. So the Maha Tattva is often considered to be the first evolute, which pervades all the universe. That's Buddhi, intelligence. If we look at our chart, which we're going to have to look at anyway, when we, I wanted to get it up, and I don't know where it went, but let's keep going. Okay, it's up there somewhere, and we're going to need it anyway. We'll come back to this first when we get the chart up. Okay, in other words, and what's the minute the yogi can perceive the subatomic particle? Take it or leave it. Scientists can't see it. They infer it's there, and the atom leaves a trail in some kind of a chamber, and you perceive it's the trail of the atom. You perceive its effects. You can't actually perceive the atom or the muons and all these tiny subatomic particles. They're not perceivable through instrumentation. You perceive their effects. The yoga will claim you can see them. Take it or leave it. So you can see the smallest the smallest thing is the Mahānu. Anu means an indivisible entity. You can't divide it anymore. Then it ceases to be an entity. All right, so the particle dissolves into a wave. Then it's no longer a particulate. That quantum, even in quantum theory, the whole wave particle mystery. So that when it's a particle, it's localized. So that the smallest the smallest particulate of matter is the anu. It cannot be broken down into, if you break it down, it dissolves into subtle energy. That's what we're talking about here.
You want the chart?
Yeah. You mean
Okay.
the control, right?
But let me share.
Share what?
The screen.
Okay. So the yogi's control. Oh, this thing. Yeah, where did that come from? Here's the chart. We need it. You have that? Okay, this Prakriti, which is just three gunas, and it's alinga. There's no sign of it. There's no way it can be perceived. No way it can be perceived. It has no signs. We need this for our of future verses. This is fine.
Cannot make it bigger.
It's okay. It's okay. We're going to be only a second here.
Okay.
Right. So then the first thing that comes out of it is the Maha. We just read in the verse, Maha Tattva. It's the first principle of individuation. In other words, Prakriti emerges this, and it's sometimes called a linga. You've heard of the Shiva linga, because the Shiva linga means a sign. What's the sign of Shiva? Is the Shiva linga. So the first sign of Prakriti that's perceivable, that even science could maybe at some point, if they keep going down into, now they've got strings, maybe, that'll become accepted. String, these vibrational, some physicists saying, oh, there's nothing beyond that. Well, how the hell they know that? Newton thought the atom was the final thing. And now you realize there's a whole universe within an atom. So, therefore, if Sankhya would say to modern day physicists, the ultimate before raw matter itself, it's the penultimate and the only perceivable, the subtlest. If you're looking for an underlying theory of everything, you're looking for a law that combines gravity with quantum mechanics, right? Because they've combined You know, they combine electricity and magnetism were thought to be two things, and they combined them to electromagnetism. They thought space and time were two things. Now we have space time. They thought particles and waves were two things. Now we have quantum mechanics. And I as far as I know, it's now come down to the binary. Those four things have come down to a distinction between, and now they're trying to combine gravity with quantum mechanics. But Sankhya would say, if they knew about all that, they would say, well, if you keep going, your ultimate final substratum before raw energy itself, which is just the gunas, which is imperceivable. There's no way you can perceive it or anything like that. But you could, in principle, perceive buddhi, and buddhi is intelligence. Now, whether that is the mathematical foundation of the world, Allah, whoever it was, but Pythagoras, you know, that the basis of all reality is you know, codes, you know, who knows, but it means intelligence. And then that breaks into ego, and then you get these subtle energies, the tan, only them, right? And okay, sound, touch, form, taste, smell. That sounds very medieval, but what are they? They're shaktis. They're vibrational, physical evolutes from Prakriti. And then you get your subatomic entities. You know, okay, modern physics would say, you know, after Big Bang, you had hydrogen, then you had helium, and now we got our periodic table, and there's a logic to why the way that they classify it and what makes it onto the periodic table, what doesn't. Well, Sankhya would say actually there's 5 kinds of subatomic. You can reduce them all to 5. And the yogi can perceive the smallest in that verse. Why do we do all of this? And I'm glad we did it, because we're going to have to do this with savitarka, nirvitarka, savichara, nirvichara samadhi. We're going to have to come back to the screen. So they would say you can see the subatomic particle, whatever that ends up being, muons, gluons, before it breaks down into something vibrational. The smallest particulate used to be called an atom, but that atom doesn't apply anymore, because they found out there are smaller particulates within an atom. There's electrons and protons and neutrons. And now you have these muons, and they're building that bloody great big thing, all right, to try to sort of get down to even smaller particulates, right? This verse, well, let's put it all together. How do I get out of this? This verse says the yogi's mastery, look at that chart, the Mahatattva is buddhi, the first evolute, the first linga. It's also called linga. He can experience before creation, one step after Prakriti, cannot experience the gunas themselves. But the first evolute, the yogi can experience that. His mind can immerse. Remember the Prakriti Layanams? Remember the Prakriti Layanams? They're yogis who get stuck there in these high states of cosmic awareness. And they're called the Prakriti Layanams. They kind of like get off the boat too early and they think they're enlightened. Here it is. The Prakriti Layanams. Here, Prakriti Layan. They could be any form. That could be absorbed in buddhi. They could be absorbed in some of the Shaktis that are cosmic, because they pervade the whole universe before particulates. Particulates then localize the gunas into atoms, subatomic entities. They're particulates. But before that, you have universals. They're universally these Shaktis and Ahankara and Manas. Am I making any sense? Are you following, my friends? Is it sort of kind of, yes? Prashant. Good. All right, because I want to sort of, El Grabar. Good. Right, Jason, right, let's keep going. I've got enough thumbs up. Okay. Now, and we need that information for verse 42, so we're not getting 2 for the price of 1. Okay. Now then. So,
Edwin, will you make it bigger, please?
okay. So the yogi can go from the smallest to the biggest. The smallest is the particulate. if it goes before, and then it dissolves into what we would say we would probably, misconnect. Why not? Quantum. Right now, samapati. Well, let's just get to the English. Oh, look, this is the jewel. So when the mind is completely sattvic, often when we talk about pure sattva, we talk about the luminosity in terms of luminosity, but you can also think of it as somehow it has a reflective nature too. And you often find the metaphor of the mirror of the mind. That's what asmita samadhi is. So this is called samapati. It's free from all vrittis, because we're in a state now of the high chitta vritti nirodha. We're in a state of nirodha, which would be, samadhi. We're in samadhi. The mind becomes like a transparent jewel, and it reflects whatever's put in front of it, whether it's the knower, the instrument of knowledge, or the object of knowledge. The knower is not the Atman. It's the intelligence, buddhi. The instrument of knowledge, it could be the mind, could be the shaktis behind the senses. They're all instruments of knowledge. And the object of knowledge are the anus, the particulates. It doesn't matter. The mind is so pure, whatever object is put in front of it, the mind can become fixed on it, absorb itself in it, and use it as an object of meditation. And it could be the entire cosmos itself, is what he said in the previous verse. The grasp, I'll do it again because it's so astonishing. It's such an astonishing claim that the control of the yogi goes from the Mahatattva, the great cosmic, the whole universe emerges from the Mahatattva, pre-creation. And post-creation, it is the ultimate substratum. This table, we say it's made of, atoms within which are, subatomic particles. And if you keep dissolving it, so Sankhya would say, yes, it's made of those particulates, but they themselves are densifications of subtler things. And those subtler things that, are densifications of even subtler things. And the subtlest thing of all is the Mahatattva. And that Mahatattva pervades the whole universe. So you can know the whole universe if the accomplished yogi. It's not the goal. And you can see how you could easily get sidetracked. If you're conscious of can you imagine being omniscient? How that would turn your head, how you'd think you were liberated. You are in a sense, but you're still trapped in Prakriti. You're still trapped in Prakriti. We'll take questions, Cynthia, at the end. Okay? So therefore it's not the goal. But nonetheless, the yogis control. Right, now we get to anything you put in front of it. It becomes like a mirror or a gem, he says, transparent jewel. It takes the form of a water. When your consciousness sees something, it molds itself into that thing. Later on, the commentators compare it to, liquid metal being poured into a mold. So liquid metal is just liquid metal, but it can take the form of a mold. So the mind takes the form of whatever's put in front of it. And remember, we're talking about your alambanas. All of this is about fixing the mind. And he's just takes this little discussion to this astonishing place that the mind can actually be fixed on the smallest particulate to the entire cosmic underlying, what physicists might say, the unifying principle of all of it, underpinning all material reality. But not the three gunas themselves. So it's penultimate, I think. So now this samapati, right? Now we're talking about samadhi, also known as sabija samadhi. Now we had, let's go back to the 4 stages of samadhi, because now 2 of them are going to be subdivided into sa and nir. Sa means with, nir means without. Let's just make our connection. We have to make our connections. We had a discussion. Why did it do that? Okay. And why did it do that? Stop. Now go over. No, I want to get over here. Okay. There we are. And now we do this and that. There we are. Okay. I'm obviously not very good at this. Sorry, my friends. Doing the best I can. Okay. I'll just do it the old. I'll just scroll. No, we have to go back. There's no question. We have to go back because we have to look at this verse. Right before the Ishvara verses, we had this verse, okay, which was this one here. Vitarka, Vichara, Ananda, Asmita. This is the Sampragnata Samadhi. Everybody, please. 4. Now we're going to, this Vitarka is going to be divided into Sa and Nir. Sa means with, Nir means without. Vichara is going to be divided now when we go back to where we were in verse 40 something. Sa Vichara, Nir Vichara. So now here we had 4 stages of Sabhija Samadhi. We now had to add another 2 because this is going to be broken into 2. That's going to be broken into 2. So now you got 4 plus Asmita and Ananda. Everybody clear? Make a note. Vitarka and Vichara are the topics of our next verses. Now he's going to, he threw them out here, just kind of introduce us to these 4 stages of Samadhi. Now he's going to go back in and refine them. I certainly refine the first 2. So we're going to have Savitarka, Nirvitarka, Savichara, Nirvichara. Okay, Vitarka here, Vichara. In Sanskrit, you have to, the words are stuck together. You have to know where to break them. This is 3 words, Vichara and Ananda and Asmita. In the Sanskrit itself is all one big line. You have to know where to break it up. So I'm going to hold that down and then I grab that little thing. Got it. Okay. Now, so okay, what did I say? Savichara, Nirvichara. Right. Okay. So here we have Savitarka. Savitarka. The first of the 4 in that verse, what was that? It was 117. Now we're going to, that's Vitarka, it's going to be Savitarka. What is Savitarka? It is your object of meditation, Tatra, the object of meditation, Shabda Artha Jnana Vikalpe Sankirna. When you're meditating on your Om or your prana or your object of meditation, there's still an awareness. It's still intermixed. Your awareness, there's no your chitta-vritti nirodha. Your mind isn't actively thinking about the object, but there's awareness of what it is, its meaning, the idea of it. So you know that the prana, you're fixing the mind on the prana, but there's a subtle awareness in the mind, not an active, thoughtful one, not a deliberative one, but there's an awareness that this, prana is the word, the name for it. You know its name. You know what it is. There's an awareness of it as an individual thing, and where does it fit into the universe of objects? So there's this. So the awareness is intermixed with the notions of the word, the name for the thing. If I'm doing Om, I know it's a name of. There's an awareness. This is the name of Ishvara. Meaning, I know it means Brahman. It means Ishvara. The idea is still this kind of. It's conceptual. It's still. There's an awareness of what the thing is. So that's Savitarka. Nirvitarka, you may have guessed already, Smriti Parishuddho. All memory is purged. If you have no memory, you don't know what the word is. You don't know language anymore. You don't know what an object is as distinct from any other object. Your memory has been purged. If you have no memory, you don't know what a door is. And you don't know what it's called. So your Smriti Parishuddho, there's a purging of memory. And Svarupa Shunya Eva, and the mind is empty. It's empty of its samskaras. It's the samskaras that give us a recollection. Because of samskaras, we know, okay, I'm going to get up now, and I'm going to walk out the door, and I know what a door is, and I know why I'm going out, and I'm going outside to the garden. All of that's memory. And these are all the samskaras in the mind. If that is all not purged, but it's all sattva, sattva has just pushed all that down into because nothing gets purged. But it's all pushed out of conscious awareness. There's no awareness of meaning, of anything like that. Okay, so it's absorption without conceptualization. No awareness of the linguistic sounds that name things. Right, memory has been purged. Mind is empty of its own reflective nature. So now only the object shines forth. You don't know what it is. You're not recognizing it. You don't know its name. You don't know its relationship with anything else. that object becomes your universe. And there's no conceptual awareness of what it is. That's nirvitarka. Is it a little bit clear? Remember, we're using our intellect. These are supposed to be experiential states. We shouldn't even be studying this, but Patanjali has given it to us just so we can have a clear idea of the map. But the point of this study is not intellectual. You just sort of add another intellectual project onto your intellectual repertoire. That's like a philosopher. We want to read everything, anybody. That's not going to help you at the moment of death. So the point of this kind of really technical attempt at explanation is to encourage us to practice. So that's Savitarka, Nirvitarka, right? Savitarka, you still know what the object is that you're fixing your mind on. You know its name. Okay, this is Om. It's Pranava. It's Ishvara. Nirvitarka, it's all purged. You don't know it's Om. You don't know that anything what the Upanishads say Om is Brahma. None of that. Now you're going into the subtle substructure. Remember, where did the gross objects come from? Let's go back to our Sankhya chart, if we can, please. Eleonora.
You have to allow me.
Oh, where did you get it from?
You.
Okay, can we just go down to this bottom right corner?
Let's see.
Just if you scroll down a tiny bit. You see the growth. You had it a minute ago. That was perfect. Yeah. Okay, that's great. Just go right a little bit this way. So we can see the names on the far right. No, other way, please.
That's it.
Okay. Well, there's the 5 atoms there. Okay. They call it earth, water, air, fire. It just sounds very medieval. I prefer to think of it as whatever subatomic entity, particulates are present in energy. I prefer to think of it energy, gases, liquids. That sounds a little bit more in tune with modern physics. And gases and so forth. So whatever, I guess, from the periodic table, the particulates are that are associated with these different kinds of substances. But they all come from these subtle shaktis. They call them smell, taste, form, touch. And I think because, these texts were translated during the colonial period, and they just sort of didn't really think much of, Sankhya metaphysics. So they just gave them these kind of medieval labels. I think we need to retranslate all of this, and these labels are out there now, but we need to reclaim them. It's these shaktis, they're subtle energies. So just as certain atoms are associated with gases, certain atoms are associated with energy, certain atoms are associated with liquids, right? They must be different atoms, because otherwise you wouldn't have these different physical objects. You wouldn't have gases, liquids, energies, and solids. So there must be different particulates that make something liquid or solid or a gas. So likewise, you have different shaktis that underpin our ability, sound and touch, texture and form and taste and smell. Savichara, so gross objects, okay? Gross objects, what we see these the atoms. When we touch the table, we look at it as a wooden table, and then okay, physics tell us it's really made of atoms, but those atoms are really waves. Or they have wave potentials, vibrational. In other words, not particulates anymore. They're kind of more spread out. Those are the tanmatras. And savichara meditators can perceive the subtle, in savitarka, you're perceiving the atomic makeup of an object. All right, so savitarka, you know what it is, its name and its location. And nirvitarka, you just see you're not aware anymore, your memory's purged, but you're still experiencing its atomic nature. When you go to vichara, you're experiencing its subtler vibrational because atoms are actually densifications or particularizations of waves, which they would call shaktis. Okay, back to that. Okay, is that all right? Don't worry don't just lose sleep over this. Personally, I think it's just intellectually interesting. It's kind of nice to know some of the possibilities of yoga, but all this is irrelevant to our practices, my friends. Irrelevant. We're still struggling with the yamas and niyamas. So don't, let's not get all, as they, well, I probably shouldn't say that, UK English, but let's not get all bent out of shape about this. All right, now back to this. Now, so Savitarka, okay, okay. In the same way, itayeva, in this way, savichara nirvichara cha sukshma vishaya vyakhyata. In the same way, the savichara nirvichara, the subtle, there's your vishaya. It must be the 5th or 6th time we've had it. We're only on verse 44. You see what a big word it is? So in the same way is explained the subtle nature in savichara nirvichara. And he doesn't explain it. This is why you need the commentaries. Patanjali just says, in the same way. Well, what the hell does that mean? So Vyas tells us, right? So we've gone in Savitarka, where, mind it, all of these are samadhi states. 100% chittavritti nirodha. But in Savitarka, remember, we know the name of the object of meditation. We're talking about the object of meditation. Let's be clear, the alambana, om, whatever it is, your prana. In Savitarka, you know the name and all of that. You know what it is. Even though you're not actively grittying about it, but your mind has the subtle, it's tinged with awareness. Nirvitarka, that's purged. Now, in Savichara, you go to the subtle cosmic, the subtle tanmatra, the subtle energy underpinning the particulate. But it's Savichara, it's still conscious of space and time. That object is still here, and it's still localized. So again, your mind isn't actively thinking about it this way, but it's experiencing the object as bounded by space and time. Savichara. Nirvichara, space and time dissolve, and that subtle substructure, it pervades the whole universe. Now, Hariharananda gives a useful example. Take the sun. When you know you're fixed on the sun, but you know it's a sun, you know the name for it, Sale, Surya, whatever your language is, sun, and you know what it is, it heats the universe. It's not that you're actively thinking about what it is, but there's an awareness of it. That's Savitarka. When your memory, you're not thinking about it, you don't know the name, you're not aware of the name, what are you experiencing? Just a luminous object. Your luminous object, you're not thinking of its name, its function, its heat in the universe. That's Savitarka, Nirvitarka. When you go deeper and you perceive that's the luminous, sorry, let me go back. Savitarka is, you know the sun, but you're still aware of its name, its function. Nirvitarka is memories purged, but you're still aware of the sun as a globe. Savichara is when you just perceive luminosity, but it's still localized by time and space. It's here, the sun is here, and there's a now. But when you go beyond here and now, you just perceive luminosity pervading the whole universe. That's Savichara. So these are the two lower states of samadhi. There were the 4 samadhis, Vitarka, Vichara. Now you have Savitarka, Nirvitarka, Savichara, Nirvichara. And then Patanjali says, here's your Vishaya. The subtle nature of things goes all the way up to the linga. The linga was the buddhi. Remember in that chart, the Sankhya chart, the first thing that comes out of Prakriti is buddhi. So that's the subtlest substructure of everything. So I guess Sankhya would say to our modern day physicists, you got to keep going. You've broken down the atom. You've gone inside that. Maybe you've got these string things. I don't know, maybe that sort of subtle vibrational stuff that are not particulates. Keep going. You're going to get to Ahankara. You're going to get to this more kind of cosmic. I don't know what the hell, how we would translate that into physicist terms. But then you keep going and you get to buddhi, and buddhi would be like codification. It would be like maybe the mathematics. I don't know. I'm just talking. This is not a conversation that I can have. This is a conversation that someone that's grounded in Sankhya and grounded in modern physics can have, and start thinking about, if we were to have this conversation and do justice and not force things into molds that don't belong to, but if we were to try to see whether there's an overlap between Sankhya and physics, what would it look like? Well, then when you get to this buddhi, that would look like some type of, buddhi means intelligence, it means organization, it means, determination, there's a structure to it. So maybe there'd be underpinning it all would be the mathematics of Pythagoras. I don't know. But that's what the verse says. This subtle nature goes all the way to the linga here in the middle. The linga is the buddhi, another term for buddhi, the first evolute out of Prakriti. The first, and this would be the last perceivable thing by empirical science, if you got that far. Let's say Sankhya is an accurate map of, I'm not saying it is or it isn't, but were Sankhya to be an accurate metaphysical representation of the ultimate nature of the universe, were that to be the case, then buddhi would be the last thing that can be empirically known, because the three gunas are going to be totally beyond sense perception and any kind of instrumentation, any kind of macroscope or microscope or hub, and it would be imperceivable. There would be no sign of it whatsoever. And this has nothing to do with the Purusha. We're still in the realm of Prakriti, matter. Three gunas you could never. In fact, Sankhya calls it the inferred one. They say we infer that buddhi evolves from something. So they even Sankhya accepts it can only be inferred that it must exist, like black matter and dark energy. Infer it because something's pushing the universe apart. Something's forcing. There's a force that's pushing everything away. The universe is expanding. So infer there must be this thing. But the last thing you can, when one day I'm sure they'll be able to perceive it in some sort of way. But the last thing you could perceive is buddhi. You could never ever perceive the three gunas, the ultimate matrix. But Sankhya says we infer it must exist because, and I can't remember what their reasoning is, that buddhi is already an evolute. It is not the ultimate matrix of everything, and I forget what reasoning is that they say that's the case. Why can't buddhi be the ultimate matrix? I don't know what we could check that. So these are sabija samadhi. Why are they sabija? Because the mind is fixed on even these subtle things are still mentally being accessed, and anything accessed by the mind leaves a bija, a samskara. Bija is a samskara. So they're imprinted on the mind. So in principle, you can go out of samadhi states and describe them because you have a mental record of them. There's no mental record of nirbija. You can't go out of nirbija and describe what happened. Not like a dream that you can wake up and say, oh, I had this dream, that dream, because it's imprinted on your mind. All the sabija states, they have a bija, a samskara, and that's recorded on the mind. But what nirbija, there's no record. So then you could very well say, well, what the hell do I want to go in a state and I can't remember it? Why is that attractive? What kind of a interesting proposition is that? Well, all we know is that when yogis do attain that state, that the interest doesn't, this world has no more interest to them whatsoever. So we can say that much at least, that the world now ceases to be a place of any interest. Remember the higher vairagya, right? We make connection between our verses. Sartu, right? Vairagya. There's the lower vairagya, and then tatparam, 116, the higher vairagya, guna vaitrishnam, no interest in anything made of the gunas, none of the evolutes, nothing, no subtles, no. This is why yoga is not interested in kundalini and all that stuff. They're going to say, well, that's still guna. That's still guna stuff, all these chakras and mystic sensations and this, right? In chapter 3, we're going to see Patanjali describes the cities, which are of great interest to the Shakta Hatha traditions. And he describes a few of them. And then Patanjali says they're not of interest of real yogis whose minds, they're only of interest of those who we'll see, even Patanjali makes a slightly dismissive statement about those interested in the cities. They're of interest to those whose minds were outward flowing. What does that mean? They're interested in Prakriti still. This is the attitude of yoga and Sankhya and Vedanta to the Hatha traditions. They don't say it's not possible. They don't say it's make-believe. They simply say it's still kind of a little bit, it's still trapped in this amazing high level, but still Prakriti. So Guna Vaitrishnam is the higher Vairagya, right? Disinterest in so that we know that. We know that when you attain the state of Nirbija, You come out of the state and you say, oh, what happened? Well, you know, where'd you go? What was the experience? The yogi cannot explain that because it's completely there's no imprint. There's no bija. If I say to you, you went on holiday, I say, oh, you went to Venice. What's it like? Yeah, and you have all the memories of Venice and you say, oh, with this, that, and the other. But there is no imprint, and that's why it's near bija. There's no imprint, so you can't describe it. So then you could say, well, should I be interested? Well, whatever it is, when you come out of that state, nothing made of the gunas interests you anymore. So therefore, that state is infinitely more blissful or more, it's a state you just want to go back to. And the Vedantins they give it a name. They call it Ananda. They say Satchidananda. But it's not, it's maybe helpful because then we say, oh, okay, Ananda, all right, well, I could do it. But we don't have a clue what that Ananda is because it's got nothing to do with any pleasures that we're familiar with, which leave their beaches. Whatever your most pleasant, blissful experience is, leaves a bija in the mind. That's why you can then talk about it the next day. You got a memory. So Vedanta tries to say, okay, this, you know, Sankhya never says Satchidananda. They say Satchid. They don't even bother. But Vedanta probably figures, look, that's not, you know, you're not going to get people interested if you just say Satchid. All right, so they throw out this word Ananda. Right. Now, from that state, we're going to finish the chapter today. So these are sabijas. Nirvichara Vaishara Dye. Now this nirvichara, where your still mind is fixed on the object, but you're not aware what it is, don't know its name, you've gone into a substructure, it's not even localized, it's cosmic, you're having an experience of the subtle, cosmic, substratum of all reality. That Vaisharadya, that clarity you get there, is clarity because your mind isn't cluttered up with atomic, impositions, and, you've gone right to the very core. There's no names cluttering it, no conceptual awareness. You've gone beyond all of that. So now the mind, there's lucidity of the Atman. At that point, and here we're back to the mirror of the mind kind of verse. Because the goal isn't to know Prakriti, it's to know yourself. Is to experience consciousness, that which is conscious. All these states of sabija, the consciousness is conscious of something external to itself. Even it's pervading the substructure of Prakriti. It's not the self. The goal is to know yourself, as Plato said. So now there's lucidity, and there is I would collect this with asmita. The mind knows and even reflects the self back to itself. It's perceiving it indirectly. It's not svarupa vastanam because the experience is going on in the mind, not in the sva. It's not going on in consciousness itself. Consciousness is seeing its reflection in the mind. So that's that verse there. Adhyatma means the innermost self. There is nirvichara creates a vaisharadye, clarity, and prasadam is prasadaha means like lucidity. There's lucidity of the innermost self. There's a viveka or a prajna. There's so many words mean more or less the same thing. There's like 3 or 4 words in the Yoga Sutras. Viveka, prajna, ritambhara, his ritambhara. Prajna, his prajna. Wisdom, truth-bearing. Rita is an old Vedic word. In the Vedas, Rita was that which kept the whole universe going. Later on, it becomes Dharma. Dharma is that which Dra means to uphold, sustain. The Dharma sustains the world. So the Rita was the cosmological order, which in the Vedic time was maintained by Vedic ritualism. You had to do your Vedic rituals, and then Rita was preserved. So what does it mean? Ritambhara, truth-bearing. So the commentators just connect this with viveka. At this point, there is absolutely no question that there's no doubts. You are indirectly perceiving the Atman. You've gone beyond theory, beyond svadhyaya, beyond, there is a viveka and a prajna, same meaning, there's no difference. If anybody's sorry, the commentators don't make any difference between these words. Prajna, viveka, ritambhara. It just means truth-bearing. And what is truth-bearing? Well, I'm an Atman. What's the ultimate truth? Everything else is secondary. So now it's just a matter of time before the mind dissolves. It doesn't dissolve, but it becomes so utterly still, it's not even reflecting Atman back to itself. Anyway, and Shruta Anumana. Remember our pramanas? Remember the right ways of knowledge? Let's make our connections, my friends. A good teacher, when you're doing asana, will say, oh, this is downward dog, downward dog legs and this other pose. So what are our pramanas? Here, pramanas, right knowledge. Next verse. Anumana in the middle. Anumana, sense perception, pratyaksha. Anumana and agama. Agama is words, sacred words. Now he uses now we're going to see anumana and we're going to see agama, but another word for agama is shabda. So we go down to, I've just got 3 more verses, Brahma. We're done for today. So Shruta is agama, anumana, prajnabhyam, anya vishaya, vishesha. Here's your vishaya, my friends. Somebody count how many times we have this word, vishaya. Vishesha artava. Right. What is he saying? He's saying when you know, in these Savitarka Nirvichart, when you know your object, when you're experiencing your object, you're experiencing its particularity. When I say something like an atom is a universal. What the philosophers call universal. When I say there are cows in the field, that word, the cows, is a universal. I'm not talking about a particular cow called Bessie. So the philosophers say, Aristotle, as well as the Nyaya school, on what grounds do we say the word chair? Why don't we just say, in this room, there's an object with 4 legs, and then in the other room, there's another object with 4 legs. One chair is completely different from another. What gives us a right to say there are chairs? What is the property of this category of things, whether they're cows or chairs or anything, that allows us to group them together with other things that seem of the same kind? Why don't we call each one a different name? This chair is amagama. This other chair is abracadabra. This third chair is is blah, blah, blah. Why are we allowed to say, I have chairs in my living room? The philosopher has to have an answer for that. And so some philosophies, not the Buddhists, they didn't like this, but Aristotle did, and the Nyaya said they must have a property. They must have something about them that, over and above the fact that they have 4 legs, they must be something about, they must contain some metaphysical property. And these are called universals. So when we talk, we use universals. We say, okay, I sleep in a bed. Well, I say I sleep in my bed. And all of a sudden we have the word bed signifying 2 completely different objects. How does that come to be? Buddhists would just say, well, they're similar. They're similar enough. We put them in so they would have a more sort of a common sense. But the philosophers would say no. They have reasons why that's not good enough. All right, so that's called a universal, and you'll find that in Greek philosophy. Now, usually when we use language, we don't have the particularity that my bed. We use the other forms of knowledge. Words are universal. If I say there are cows in the field, I'm using 2 universal, fieldness and cowness. Each field is different. Each cow is different. But when I say there are cows in the field, I've employed words, the shruta, and inference. Wherever there is smoke, there is fire. I'm using the universal of smoke. It always has the universal of fire as its cause. So these are universals. So what he's saying here is when you perceive the object of meditation, you've gone beyond its universal, beyond the fact that it's part of a category of things, and you're perceiving its subatomic reality. And this is higher pratyaksha. Notice he only says words and inference. He doesn't say pratyaksha. Why? Because this is a kind of alokika pratyaksha. This is experiential. There's 3 forms of knowledge: sense perception, logic, and words. And each of them has a para, a higher form. So sense perception is experienced through the senses, but svarupa vastanam is experience but it's still experience. It's transcensual. Likewise with logic. Okay, I think we're getting a bit too. So he's just saying that in these high states of samadhi, you know the subatomic structure of the thing. You know how it is different, how this cow is different from that. Their atoms are different. So each object that we under a universal, like chairs, chairness, each object is different from another object in that universal. They have different subatomic properties, constituents. So the yogi can know one chair, two identical chairs, and he knows them distinctively, goes beyond the universal to their subatomic nature. That's the claim that's being made. That's what the mind can do. It's not the goal, but Patanjali's just saying it there. Now we get back to what's real meditation. Tadja samskara, the samskara is born of this ritambhara, this high state. The samskara is born of that. Anya samskara pratibandhi. These are the nirodha samskaras. The samskara is born of this high level knowledge. They pratibandhi. They prevent, they obstruct other samskaras. When you're practicing chitta vritti nirodha, what are you doing? You're obstructing samskaras for arising in the mind to form vrittis. We've only got one more verse, my friends. Hang in there. We're almost there. Actually, we're on the dot. When you're doing chitta vritti nirodha practice, sitting there, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama. Then my email samskara arises. Did that person reply to my email? So, right. So now my mind is trapped, and that creates a vritti. Memory creates a vritti. Now my consciousness is wrapped up in this vritti. But some other samskaras drags my mind back to my mantra. That's the pratibandhi samskara, also known later on as the nirodha samskara. There's a samskara, rises in the mind, brings my mind back to my focus on my mantra. Here it's called a pratibandhi samskara, a obstructing one. It obstructs the mind from going off. And later it's called the nirodha samskara. You know, why do I think this is of value to us as practicing yogis? I hope it gives us a sense of the profundity, the technical precision, the metaphysical sophistication of, not that any of those things are relevant to our practice, but hopefully they bolster our faith. That isn't just some, like, illiterate yogi sitting there, some wild men in the forests, but there is amazingly sophisticated, should one need that. And most yogis in India are illiterate, by the way. The guys you see walking around in their kopins, in their loincloths, and with their trishul and their dreadlocks, they're all illiterate. Maybe one or two in the band will be able to read. Mostly they're illiterate. They're really, they barely speak. They speak village dialects that, if you speak Hindi, you don't even have a clue what they're talking about. Heavy kind of. So all which is to say, erudition is not at all necessary. But the sutra traditions give us an exposure to, if you want intellectuality, if you have that kind of a mind, if you need some philosophical backbone to taking this leap into doing yoga practice, you got it. That's the value, I think, of this. Otherwise, all these savicharya, it's just more vrittis. Don't get too caught up in it. We're not even in this lifetime are we going to get near these states. Certainly me. So, but it does, for me anyway, it does give me respect, and it gives me, inspires me, and if you can hold your own. If somebody comes and tries to belittle your practice, you can, then you can sort of like respond intellectually. Anyway, so these samskaras, which pratibandhi, anya samskaras, there is a samskara that prevents other samskaras. So let's say the other samskaras are, let me check my email, let me, think about what I'm going to cook today. Those are the other samskaras that you don't want in your mind. So the samskaras that are pratibandhi, that oppose them, those are your nirodha samskaras. They are born from these high states of samadhi. And the last one is tasyapi nirodhe, when even the pratibandhi samskara, the samskara that suppressing other samskaras, and you want that, when even that one is suppressed, tasya api nirode, you know what nirodhana means? When even that is nirodha, your faithful pratibandhi samskara that's done the job of suppressing all others, he's your commander-in-chief, he's the Terminator samskara, he's your Schwarzenegger samskara that's made sure nothing else is emerged in the mind. When even that one, tasya api nirode, sarva nirodhan, when everything is niroded, that's nirbija. That's nirbija samadhi. Nirbija samadhi is when not even you're controlling that samskara that's making sure nothing else stirs. The nirodha, so here it's called a nirodha, in nirodha samskara, here it's called a pratibandhi, the opposing, when even that one. So and remember earlier on, he says, what's your last memory? Your last memory is of the nirodha samskara. The last memory you have before entering nirbija, the last conscious, intentional imprint on the mind is a samskara that's making sure no other samskaras stir. When it's done its job so effectively, so thoroughly, nothing is stirring, it becomes redundant. You don't need it anymore. It then dissolves into, it didn't dissolve, it then becomes a latent, and now there's nothing on the mind, no object of meditation, nothing. That is near bija samadhi. There's not even awareness of the object of meditation. Look at that. We did it right on the button. Look at it. It's 8 o'clock, 7:59. All right, friends. Lalita has had a hand up for an hour and a half. Go ahead, Lalita. Thank you for your patience.
Namaste.
Namaste, Ji.
Do you say Buddha's nirvana state, nothingness, is nirbija samadhi?
We don't know. All we know is what much later Buddhists start. Buddha was not a philosopher. He's not, his teachings were just, more about freeing, the Four Noble Truths at the core of the teachings, right? You're suffering, there's a cause, that's your desire, there's a state beyond it, and there's a path. He was not a philosopher. So any kind of attempt to answer that comes many centuries later, and then you have the various Buddhist schools. The one I'm a little bit familiar with is Madhyamaka, and they would say nirvana is not a svarupa vastanam state because they don't accept any svarupa. Buddhists, everything is momentary and interdependent. All consciousness has to have an object. It's intentional. We call that intentional consciousness, is when consciousness has an object. So Buddhists do not accept that consciousness can be free of an object. You cannot have consciousness conscious of consciousness, number one. And number two, that consciousness is momentary. It is not sat. So therefore, whatever the Buddha, and then there's this famous, what do they call it? Tetralegomon or something. I forget how the word that, does the Buddha, has the Buddha Tathagata? Has he gone there? Has he not gone there? He's neither gone, he's not gone. You get all this kind of these not really koans, but they're attempts to sort of jolt us out of our cause effect. Well, to answer your question, no. Buddhism, the yoga debates, Vedanta debates and rejects the Buddhist momentariness, because they obviously they have to, because Vedanta says that the Atman is Sat. And yoga would say it's Svarupa, it can be absorbed in its own nature. Eternally absorbed in its own nature. No, Buddhists would say consciousness always has to be conscious of other. It can never be Sva Rupa. So they're not, so they are, and their theologians don't think they're talking about the same thing. That's why they debate, and that's why they kind of rebut each other philosophically. So I don't think, I think nirvana is an enlightened state. I think it is a state, a transcendent, but I don't think it's the same state. I don't think that all moksha states are the same. I've said that many times in these videos. I think there are different enlightenment experiences, and they are not the same. And the Buddhists have never accepted like a Brahman or a state beyond Prakriti. Nagarjuna, most famously, the Madhyamaka, he's like a second Buddha. He said samsara is nirvana, nirvana is samsara. So it's an enlightened state of being within what we call samsara. That's the Buddhist nirvana, at least according to Nagarjuna. It's not something completely other, as Brahman is other. Atman, Purusha, is other to Prakriti. Brahman is other to samsara. That's not the Buddhist nirvana, certainly not the Madhyamika. So whatever that state is, and I have no doubt it's real, and it's exactly what the Buddhists say it is. It's not what the Vedantins are talking about, and it's not what the yoga. So either you say one is right and one is wrong, or you say they're both right. And if you say they're both right, they are not talking about the same thing. Therefore, if we wish to accept them as both true, and why shouldn't we? Enlightenment itself has different possibilities. And I've said that many times, and that's my position. Especially as a bhakta, I've also said many times, bhaktas are not interested in Swarupa Vastanam. So they're interested in a whole other different kind of liberated possibility with a distinct Bhagavan in a relationship of love. So that's the best I can do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Prashant.
Thank you, Edwin, and Namaskaram. I
Namaskaram.
just want to build upon my question from the last session around the Brahman, Ishvara, and Bhagavan. Now, the Ishvara Pranidhana that is referred to in the sutras, is it a sort of a proto bhakti, or is it because we are not referring to Bhagavan here, right? So is it a proto form of bhakti, or is it just a chanting of Om, which will give you is it a Nirodha practice, which will, by just chanting the Om?
Yeah, Ishvara is a Purusha Vishesha. He's a real being. He's a real being. He's not a mental construct, and he's definitely not some other liberated a proto-yogi, because he's never been affected by klesha and karma. His omniscience is unsurpassed. So he's the Ishvara of the philosophers. And the Ishvara of the philosophers is the creator of the universe. Even though Patanjali doesn't speak of creation, why should he? He's not talking about creation. He's talking about meditation. There's no reason to doubt he understands Ishvara in the same ways everybody else did, and Ishvara in Vedanta is the creator. But it's just when you use the term Ishvara, you're just talking about a personal, intelligent being who creates. He's omniscient, omnipotent, but it's kind of vague. The minute you talk about Bhagavan, then that Ishvara takes form and qualities. At that point, you're going to have to, you'll be expected to say Bhagavan Krishna, Bhagavan Shiva. You're going to be expected, which Bhaga, what set of Bhaga? Bhaga means qualities. What the Van means possessor. What set of qualities are you talking about? Are you talking about the wonderful Shiva with his beautiful white effulgent, or are you talking about the gorgeously sweet Krishna with his beautiful blue and his lotus eyes? You're talking about the majestic Narayana. So Bhagavan is now when Ishvara manifests form, quality, Nama, Rupa, Guna, Lila. Nama has a specific name, like tree is just generic. Ishvara is generic, but then an apple tree now has a Nama. It has a particular rupa that's different from an apricot tree. It has a qualities, and it has a lila. It produces a certain kind of. So now that's Ishvara. And then when we use Bhagavan is when Ishvara manifests in the world. And Brahman is even more generic still. It just means the absolute truth. And in fact, for some, Brahman is beyond Ishvara. But Vaishnavas, Brahman is Ishvara. Krishna says in the Gita, I am the basis of Brahmano hi pratishtaham. I am the basis of Brahman. So for Vaishnavas, Ishvara is the source of Brahman. For the Advaitins, it's the other way around, that Ishvara is secondary, derivative to an impersonal Brahman. So that's a different kind of conversation that's going on in Vedanta. So what was the rest of your question, Prasant?
The question was, what is the Ishvara Pranidhana practice that Patanjali is referring to? Is it just the chanting of Om?
Yes, that's all. That's it. He doesn't talk about puja. He doesn't talk about living in the holy Vrindavan. None of that. And Vyas calls it bhakti vishesha, a special kind of bhakti. But the real bhaktas, the heavy duty bhaktas, will say this is jnana mishrita bhakti. Because the goal is not really devotion. The goal is really you pranidhana. Why? Because you want Svarupa Vastanam. You're not really interested in Ishvara. You're not interested in, well, who is Ishvara? And you're not falling in love. There's no talk of love. There's no talk of the things bhaktas are interested in. So therefore, Ishvara is kind of like, it's kind of a functionalistic relationship, a kind of almost mercantile. You fix your mind on Ishvara because he's going to give you samadhi. So later, later theologians will say, okay, that's a kind of bhakti, but it's a jnana mishrita. It's not pure bhakti. Yes. So therefore, Ishvara is just Om. That's why he doesn't talk about Bhagavan. He doesn't start saying, well, Ishvara is blue. If you started doing that, well, what are the Shaivas are not going to be happy with that? Or, you know what I'm saying? He just keeps it as generic, but he's definitely a theist. Otherwise, he wouldn't have said Ishvara. He would have said Om is Brahman. If he was an Advaitin, he would have said, fix your mind on Om. Om is that nirguna, nirvishesa, that impersonal Brahman. So he's clearly not an Advaitin. He's clearly an Ishvaravadin. All right. So, but he wants to be as generic as he possibly can, so he doesn't alienate anybody. So Shaivas are happy. Okay, that's our Ishvara. And Krishna Bhaktas, oh, that's our little Lala Gopal. And the Vaishnava, oh, Narayana, Ishvara. Okay, so I think that's a smart move, personally. But he is being a theist. He's not being an Advaita Brahmavadin. Otherwise, he would have said, fix your mind on Om. Om is Brahman. Brahman is Nirguna. He didn't take that path. Great question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Just an add-on to that, it's more of a Sanskrit question. So is it Brahma or Brahman? Because
Brahman,
in
Brahman,
English,
Brahman,
Brahma.
Brahman. Short, it's a neuter noun. Brahman.
Okay.
But when you put it in a compound, the end sometimes falls, is taken off. So then you say Brahmabhuti, Brahmajoti, because when you have a compound, when it's compounded with another word, the end gets taken off. So that's why sometimes when it's with another word, it's Brahma Jyoti, Brahma Bhuta, Brahma anything else. But when it's alone, and it's just Brahman, short A.
Yeah.
Well done. Thank you. Marco.
Hi, Edwin.
Hello.
Thank you for today's Advaita. I have a quick question about the Samadhi. So Patanjali divides the seed Samadhi with seed into 4 types, and then the seedless Samadhi is just one. This is not further divided, right?
Yeah, because the seedless there's not a mental state. It's only Svarupa Vastanam. There's no hierarchies in it. There's no going subtler and subtler. There's no dimensionality in it. It's just Satchidananda. Krishna says in the Gita, you cannot divide the Atman. There's no inside, there's no outside, there's no demarcate. It's just pure. So it's one thing. So Nirbija is pure Chitti Shakti. Whereas the mind's ability the mind is fixed on an object. That object is made of different densification of subtler things. So your object can be experienced atomically. It can be experienced as subtle energies underpinning the atoms. Those subtle energies themselves are emerging from subtler things. And the 4th layer is buddhi, intelligence itself. So the mind can penetrate the different, physics would say, objects are made of atoms, but really atoms are really electrons and neutrons, and they're really strings, and atoms are something somewhat similar. So we have a frame of reference for thinking about this, even from modern physics, that something is perceived, we can experience it on one level, but its reality may be subtler levels, and yogis can perceive those subtler levels. That's all. Yeah, Nirbija is one. There's no divisions in Nirbija.
Okay. And I have a question of how the samskaras relate this, because in the translation you use emerging. So I think that stopping samskaras from emerging, that's different from deleting samskaras, right? That's kind of putting a pause on them.
You can never delete them. They're always going to be, matter is not created or destroyed. Your samskaras of infinite past lives, even if you're on the highest state of sabija, they're all in the subconscious. They're just not emerging. You can't delete them in the sense of remove them from the mind. You can't do that. You can push them down where they're absolutely and utterly what Freud would call the subconscious or the unconscious. You can push them down to the subconscious. Just like all of your past life samskaras are all there. Where are they now? Subconscious. They're not emerging in your mind, but they're all there. Every single, nothing gets destroyed any more than the closed universe that the physicists talk about. The universe is closed. Energy is not created or destroyed. That's one of the principles of physics. The same in the mind. No samskaras are ever deleted in the sense of see, you can't eradicate anything, just like you can't eradicate anything externally. You break up your atom where you end up with neutrons and electrons. You can't destroy in the sense of causing it to be non-existent. You cannot make, just as you cannot make matter non-existent, you can break it down into its subtler components, but you can't make it non-exist. So the samskaras, you cannot make them non-exist. It's a deletion in the sense of non-existence is a metaphysical impossibility, but you can push them down into the unconscious. So they do not emerge. So that's why maybe, I'm not saying emerge is a great word, but they're there. They just don't rise up on the mind. Where did you go? Where did you go? Marco. He disappeared. Okay. John. We'll take
Hi,
John,
thank you.
John and Shanti, and then we're done, my friends, for the evening. Because anyway, we don't have any more hands up. So we'll take the last two questions. And thank you for hanging in there, everybody. This was a particularly dense technical section. I don't particularly enjoy doing it, but I love chapter 2. So we'll have chapter 2 coming up, which is really practical. It's really for us. What do we do, like getting up out of bed tomorrow? That's chapter 2, right? And then chapter 3 is kind of cool. It's a lot about the cities, mostly because the cities, I used to think Patanjali was talking about, because the end he just says they're of no interest. He just dismisses them. So why does he spend half a chapter talking about them? I used to think, well, because these cities kind of just happen unexpectedly, and you might find yourself levitating or something. But now I changed my mind on that. And I think, and this is me, so you don't have to take it seriously. There were lots of characters in ancient India doing Chittavritti Nirodha yoga, and they had no interest in Swarupa Vastanam. Some of them were demoniac, and they just wanted power. And the great demons of the Indian epics, like Ravana and Hiranyakasipu, how did they get their powers? They did Chittavritti Nirodha practices. Remember, even Patanjali says in the verses we've looked at, some people do this practice and they end up prakriti layanam, trapped in some subtle layer of prakriti. So there were characters who did, and this often gets associated with, with the kind of black hatha traditions, actually, frankly. Some of this gets lumped in with those too interested in hatha physiologies and powers and chakras are after power. So therefore, chapter 3, Patanjali, says, yeah, they're real, you can do it, but they're of no interest to real yogis. And then chapter 4 is a response to a particular school of Buddhism, which must have been around enough for Patanjali to feel he needs to respond to that particular school, Alaya, Vijnanavada, the mind-only school, who reject any external reality at all. So that's chapter 4. But chapter 2 is really Kriya. You want to be a yogi. Okay, you like all this stuff. You relate to it. It's providing a metaphysics that makes sense to you, that you find enchanting and meaningful. And okay, and then you say, okay, how do I do it? Well, that's chapter 2. John.
After taking the Sankhya course, I had the sense, thinking back on the different kinds of samadhis, the Sampranyata samadhis, that it was Nirodha was stilling manos and calming the vriddhis in manos, and that allowed our own buddhi to then start to perceive the buddhi that was in the Savitarka and Nirvitarka, the intelligence that's in the Mahabuddhas, the intelligence that's in the subtle elements, and then in Ananda and Asmita, that it was our buddhi. When you talk about the mind, that you were talking about our buddhi as the mind, the higher buddhi, once the lower mind, manas, is stilled with Nirodha. Is
Yeah,
that a fair statement?
I think that, yeah, I don't have any problem with that. Nirodha Samskara would be buddhi, though. The Nirodha Samskara would be buddhi,
Okay.
right? That samskara.
That's what lands you in buddhi.
That is buddhi, because buddhi, if buddhi is active, it's creating samskaras. Anything that acts in the mind is creating a samskara. So if you want to go with Sankhya, you have manasic samskaras, you have buddhi samskaras. The buddhi samskara, jnana, all that stuff, viveka, all those samskaras are buddhi samskaras. And manas would be raga, and you're right, they will be the more mundane ones. Okay, so let's have a look at, actually, I was going to read this with you, so thank you for this. Let's have a look at this metaphor and see if it helps. Kata, okay? Right. Now, Kata says, down here, know the self as a rider in a chariot, famous metaphor. The Atman is, okay, you got the chariot, right? The chariot is the body. And the Atman is the rider. And the body is the chariot, okay? You got a chariot, and there's someone riding it, sitting the passenger. Notice the passenger's doing nothing. Okay? Now, know the intellect, your buddhi, John, as the charioteer. That's the actual driver. The mind as the reins. So the mind is, the reins are connected to the horses. The senses, they say, are the horses. So the mind is connected with the external. So it's connecting, it's sorting through all the sense data, recording it, desires, right? The sense data that's pleasurable become desires. That's all in the mind, all in the mind. And so it's, in one sense, the most active sort of thing, because it's dealing internally with the memory and externally with the senses. But the intellect is the charioteer. It's actually deciding what to do with everything. So when you're meditating, the Nirodha Samskara is the charioteer that's controlling the mind. It is saying, and it's blocking the mind from throwing up any other kind of samskara, any samskara at all. So that's, I don't know if that metaphor is helpful, but if you want to think about it in Sankhya terms, it helps, because instead of saying the chitta is controlling the chitta, you might be able to say, well, there's one aspect of the chitta is controlling another aspect of the chitta, and the manas is the vrittis, the samskaras, the thoughts, the desires, emotionality, all that's going on in the manas.
And just related to this train of thought, Ananda, we know what the Mahabuddhas are and the subtle elements are. And then Ananda is the causal plane. It's the causal aspect of what is it, the object that we're perceiving? Everything
is the three gunas. So if you want to talk Sankhya, you have to use the language of the three gunas. Okay. And they wouldn't use the language of, if you wanted to use it, okay, Ananda Samadhi, fair enough. So that is the sattvic, when the nature of sattva is pleasure, is Ananda. I prefer to keep the word Ananda for the Atman, because I want to, if you want to make a separation between Satchit Ananda of the Atman and the fact that sattva is a prakritic guna, but it has, I prefer to say, use sukha for that, but clearly not everyone is following that. So yes, that Ananda Samadhi is still a mental state. It's a prakritic state. So at some point you have to connect it with one of the gunas. It's obviously not rajas or tamas. So when sattva is maximized, the qualities of sattva become dominant, one of which is Ananda.
Beautiful. Got it.
Okay.
And then the final one, the asmita is adhyatma in Nirvichara Adhyatma Prasada. It's the reflection of the Atman on our buddhi.
Yes, sir. Perfect. That's it.
Okay.
And that's the real asmita. And that's different from the klesha asmita, which is I'm body mind asmita. Asmi means I am. So there's two answers to the question I am. Avidya answer to I am is I am body mind. That's what we all think. The enlightened answer to the question, who are you, is Asmi Brahman Asmi. I am the Brahman, I am Atman. So Asmita can be Klishta or Aklishta. So when the mind or buddhi is reflecting the Atman, and that's the real Asmi, that buddhi now has an imprint. It has some kind of I mean, they don't talk about it as a samskara, but it must be a samskara because it's sabija. So there's some kind of a record on the mind of asmi, which is the real asmi. Yes, and that is the adhyatma prasada, and it's different labels you can give it.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. Shanti, last question, my friends. Everybody, anyway, everybody else doesn't, nobody else has a hand up.
Mine is a very ordinary question. We talked about nirvitarkas and savitarka. So in nirvitarkas mad, you talked about that being purging of memory, devoid of samskara. So is
well,
that...
we're not devoid meaning memory. Maybe I should have phrased that a little bit differently. And I don't know how to get you up here. Where did you go, Shanti?
I'm right here.
There you are. How do I pin you? I didn't have any problem.
You did pin.
Remove all spotlighted videos. Let me see what happened. Oh, yeah, you are. Sorry.
You said it's purging of memory, correct? That's
memory is not active. Remember, nothing is destroyed. Memories are samskaras. They're put into the subconscious. If we want to borrow a phrase from Freud.
okay. Then my question is, how is that different from dementia, Alzheimer's? Is that the same state? Would they be experiencing very similar?
Well, I obviously not, Shanti. When dementia would be a loss of memory that's caused by tamas, that's not in your control, and it is an awful state because you're not absorbed in the Atman, you're not absorbed in the sattva of the mind, you're not absorbed in the ananda of the Atman. Your mind is covered by tamas, and you're confused, and you lose. It's awful. It's horrific, and you lose. You don't even know who your relative. That's a tamasic state.
But horrific for whom? For the observer, the person, or the person experiencing
the
it,
person
not having that at all? For
both, Shanti. It's a horrific experience for the observer. If you've ever had to care for someone with dementia, you would know that. And it's an awful state of suffering for the person who is experiencing. And how do you know that? You just perceive their face, they're crying, they're yelling, they're fighting, they're punching, they're just freaking out because they don't know how to deal with this inability to function. It's a tamasic state, and it's massively unfortunate. Now, in these are voluntary states that the yogi wants to go beyond memory, beyond all kinds of conditionings on consciousness, and wants to experience consciousness itself without any upadhis or conditioning, and can snap out of it any time. And is experiencing first of all, the bliss of the pure sattva, and then the actual bliss of the Atman itself. They're completely opposite ends of the spectrums, the only common denominator being, okay, memory isn't active. If that's a common denominator and that's the point, well, fine. Yes, there is a common denominator, but the experience is not the same, just because the memories are being pushed into the subconscious.
Well,
I mean, I've had a very prolonged personal exposure to dementia in my own family, so I know all about dementia.
So in one case, it's a conscious way of erasing all memory.
Yeah, because you want to go to a state beyond memory, beyond the mind, because you want to experience your nature. The mind is not you. It is a parasitic overlay. It's a parasitic bondage. It's a bandhana. It's you're bound by it. You're trapped by it. You're lost your own autonomy because of this karmically imposed sheath you're in. It's like a straitjacket. So you want to go beyond that to your true nature. Whereas dementia is just an awful state of entrapment where you've lost all control over your cognitive faculties. Your memory is lost, and it's terrifying. As somebody who's in that state, they're terrified. They don't even know how to get back home. They could walk out the house, and then they're wandering around for weeks. I mean, there's a completely opposite end of it. But it is true that there's certain things have common denominators. For example, a sattvic person is detached from the world. A tamasic person is detached from the world, but for very, very different reasons. The tamasic person is detached because they're lazy, and don't want to do anything, and they're, you know, very the tamasic detachment, completely different from the sattvic one, but there's a common denominator if we wish to seek it. My friends, we're going to call
Thank
it.
you so much. That
we're-
clarified my doubt. Thank you.
You're
so
welcome. We're going to bid you good night. Marco, you already had a crack. Prashant, we go next week. You'll have another chance. Your hands are still up, but you all, hopefully you got one question in there. Good night, everybody, and we will see you. We did one chapter, and how many was this? Our fourth or fifth, whatever it is. We'll keep going, and have a good night.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye,
Good
Edwin.
night.
Thank
You're
you,
welcome.
Edwin.
Thank you so
Good
much.
Namaskar, Edwinji.
Namaskar,
Ciao.
namaskar
Thank
ji.
you.
Ciao, ciao.
Ci vediamo, ciao.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Namaste.
Namaste. I'm just checking the chats to see if there's anything I need to know about. Oh. Brahmaji, I'm done. Let me just let me turn off my mic. Oh, will it stop recording? Wait.
Oh,
Stop-
I forgot
stop.
because I'm
I'm
being kicked